love hills because I enjoy watching others suffer.
I'm gonna rule this world one day. Y'all finna know the name. I'm spitting game to the people who decide our fate. I'll make a name in history, be one of the greats. I've got the traits that you need to get past.
Sometimes we make decisions that are purely rational. And sometimes we make decisions that at their core are idealistic and ego-driven and nothing more. My decision to race the Pier to Peak Half Marathon this past weekend, was purely the second, the latter. You know, my legs were still recovering from the marathon. I took a week off, and then I had a week of about 40 miles, but most of my runs were all like 5 or 6 mile, just jog fests at like 8-minute pace. You know, I definitely didn't feel like I was recovered. I also didn't know, I mean, it was just, this last month, last 2 weeks especially, but last month have just been a blur of pain. You know, 2-week taper for the marathon, then I do the marathon, then I'm recovering from the marathon, and then I do this race, and now I'm recovering from this race. You know, I wanted to defend my title. I ran this race last year. If you guys remember, I made a video about it. Link in the description if you want to see that. The video for this race, I didn't get much footage. One, because Alex was out of town, the guy with the sick drone skills. The weather was really great for running, but really bad for filming. So the competition this year was fiercer than last year, which was good. I was very excited, especially to race my rival, Jeff, who outkicked me in my State Street Mile video a while back, like over a year ago. And we've run another race together as well. Always a good race when the two of us are head-to-head. So anyway, I knew he would bring it. He was talking a big game beforehand. So, you know, I put on a bunch of KT tape, you know, on my quad and also my hamstring, just to make sure I was as good to go as possible. And this time I ran with a run bottle, like a small one, just like a flask that fits in the palm of your hand, because last year was a heat wave and there were only 3 aid stations and they weren't very good, and I got severely dehydrated, threw up after the race. It was tough. So this year I wanted to be more prepared. I also analyzed the course and my Strava from last year and saw points where I ran too hard or ran out of gas. So this time I had more of a strategy of even paced effort, and I had an idea of what my split should be. So that was my goal going in. Now, when we started, the first 2 miles, there were 8 of us in a pack. I was leading the way. Everyone just kind of keyed off me. I think because, you know, I won last year, so some people knew that I was a real deal. So no one took it out really fast. It's not really that steep, the first 2 miles. Then mile 3, as you can see here in this photo, it kind of gets a little steeper, and it's a big spectator area, and the pack whittled down to 6 people. Now here's where my run bottle came in handy, because as you can see here, the guy in the front, Matt Carpenter, who's won before, I think he won in 2014. He took off, and I thought, what is he doing? And what he was doing is he was surging to get to the aid station, and when we got to the aid station, he stopped, and it was taking his time at the aid station. Kind of a unique strategy. And I don't know if this is part of a strategy, but he was still at the aid station when all of us caught up to him, and he blocked all the cups, and no one wanted to stop, so we all just skipped the aid station. And you know, you could hear groans like, oh, like, you know, so no one got water except me, because I had the run bottle in my hand. So I was like, okay, good, I'm glad I brought this. And you know, even when you're not thirsty, you still need to hydrate, especially, you know, when, yeah, the weather was nice and overcast, but it was kind of humid. So I decided to run without a shirt and without a hat, in case you guys were wondering about that, because I usually like to race in a hat. Then mile 4 has another steep section, but overall the mile is not that difficult, but there is a steep section that kind of breaks up the field. So that broke the field down to 4. So there was Matt, myself, and then in this picture here, right behind me you see Jeff, the shirtless guy, and then next to him is Andrew. So the 4 of us broke away from the other 2 guys on mile 4. Then Jeff took the lead, and Andrew followed, and so did Matt, and I kind of got gapped. But I looked at my watch and I knew that I was running a good pace, so I let them go. Because in these kind of races, especially races where they're continuously hilly, and the farther you go, the harder the course gets, you don't want to let your emotions get the best of you. You know, you want to just stick to your race plan. And I've done this race before, so I knew the course really well. I knew what I was capable of, so I let them go. And I figured, you know what, I'll bring them back on the steep sections. The steep sections start at mile 5, and then it gets a little easier at mile 6 and 7. There's some, you know, up and down. And then mile 8 and on is when it really gets steep. So I knew at some point I could catch up. So then we get to mile 5. Their gap grows. I think they got up to probably maybe 15-second gap on me. Kind of enough where I was like, okay, like I need to hold this gap, keep them close, within striking distance. Then around the end of mile 5, I started making my move as it was getting steeper, and I gradually caught the pack and went right around them, and then started setting my own pace. So then on mile 6, I dropped everyone except Jeff, and I started throwing in some surges, very subtle surges, kind of very sneaky actually. You know, I would do like, we would go up a hill, and then as soon as it flattened out for a moment before the next climb, I would surge. Or going around a curve, I would surge. You know, things like that, just to test him. Because you could be a fast runner, you could be really good at, you know, just flying up like one quick hill, but in these kind of races where it's just continuously climbing, I will grind you out. I will grind you out until you break. That's my mentality. So, you know, I was testing Jeff, and all these surges I put in, it's one, it's a way for me to dictate the pace. If I keep doing this, he's not going to try to make a move, he's just trying to respond to all my moves. And every time I do, I'm testing him to see where he's at mentally. You know, to see if I can gap him, or, you know, just kind of feel it out. He wasn't cracking. I was very impressed, actually. Then here's some photos here of mile 7.5, another popular spectator area. You probably recognize this from the video. So here I took the aid station, and Jeff didn't. And as you can see, the aid station wasn't even really that far out of the way, but as you can see here, he did gap me by a few seconds, but I did catch up on the next climb. Then on mile 8 is when I took the lead from him again after he had passed me, and I set the pace again, and after this he did not pass me. He just stayed right on me, and I did my best to keep the pressure on, and we were running very, very quick splits, you know, 7:30s, sub 8, you know, on these high, you know, steep climbs. And you know, I knew it was going to be a good day. We were on a strong pace, and at mile 9.5, almost 10, I noticed that Jeff's breathing was becoming fainter. I couldn't hear it as much, and I kind of like tilted my head to the side, and out of the corner of my eye I could see a small gap forming, and that gave me some hope, because for a while I was worried. I didn't know if I was going to be able to break Jeff, and I'm not used to that. I'm used to being able to do whatever I want on a hill and no one being able to stay with me. So he was running really strong. Anyway, so I got a small gap at mile 10, and then that's when he started to unravel. And talking to him afterward, he said he was getting dehydrated. If you're not staying hydrated consistently throughout the whole run, it's going to catch up with you. So I started pulling away, and I was trying to build up a lead, because mile 12 is the easiest mile of the race. It's pretty much like a little bit of a climb, and then you have a little bit of a descent. So overall it's about like a flat mile net elevation wise. So he's good at downhills. I didn't want him to catch me or pull away from me, so I tried to get a lead on that point. So I try to get a lead before that moment. So I could build up a lead of maybe about 30 seconds, as you can see from this video. And, you know, I'm just trying to put in, you know, last bit of effort to get up this hill before the downhill section. And, you know, this video here is the downhill portion. And at this point, you know, I'm just thinking about the last climb, you know, trying to keep the pace going. I know the hardest mile of the race is coming up, mile 13. So I'm just kind of mentally preparing myself for it. You can kind of see when you're going down the hill, you can look to the left and you can see the climb in the distance, like looming, you know. So it's definitely a gut check moment. And then in the last mile, I ran really strong. I extended my lead. Jeff said that he probably was running about the same pace as me, but he said at the very end, you know, he knew that at that point I had the race in hand, so he kind of let off the gas. But I got about 30 seconds on him in the last mile. I won by a minute. You know, between the good weather, having the competition, running a smart race, being in better shape, hydrating, all these factors, I was able to improve by 5.5 minutes over my time from last year. One thing that's always really entertaining is in these races, hills are my specialty. So I'm able to compete at a higher level. So I can beat runners, like in this race, you know, there's pro triathletes and sponsored top level amateurs and just a lot of guys that have extensive athletic background, much more impressive than myself. So I'll do a race and I'll win, like a hilly race, and afterward, all these runners will come up to me and say, like, ask me, you know, where I'm from, what's my name, where I went to school, and then they'll ask me, oh, is that where you ran in college? You know, they all think I was a Division I runner, or, you know, people that you beat or run with, they always want to ask you details about yourself to get some kind of validation for their own performance. You know, like, oh, you know, especially in a hill race, you don't have any sense of how good your time is because it's hilly. So you try to look around to the caliber of runners that you ran with. And it's just so entertaining when I can be like, oh, I wasn't good enough to run Division I, you know, and I just seem like a nobody compared to them. So it's like they get no validation whatsoever when they ask me about myself. But I know that I'm really good at hills, and I can't wait till next year when I can try to three-peat